Hello, and welcome to Americana X Newswatch. Today, highlights from the RNC. Well, at least my favorite moments from the RNC. Media narrative to protect rioters is driving the violence in all of our American cities. And a reminder, sort of a PSA of sorts, if you will, that police are here to actually protect our communities, so it's in all of our best interest to comply with the orders of the police if we're ever coming in contact with them. Novel idea, right? Welcome to Newswatch. This is a new news commentary show that brings a common sense perspective to our weekly news cycle. This show is for conservatives that care about what's going on behind the sensationalized headlines. If you like the content here, or shoot, even if you don't like the content here, if you are absolutely opposed to all of my ideas, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Also, share this content, whatever platform you're on, We welcome the comments. We welcome the conversation. All right, we're going to start off with my favorite moments from the RNC. This is RNC 2020, happened last week. And it was really, I guess if I were to just sum up the whole event in one statement, it would be the RNC was a positive event focused on American greatness and building a better future. Personal stories of heroism, of real people that made the convention feel totally based. And I think that was a really big difference between what we saw in the DNC and the RNC, is that the RNC actually focused more on real people and real stories. Just a really interesting contrast to kind of the more generalities and sort of platitudes of the entire DNC. Pretty much like missed opportunity for the DNC on the whole. In fact, if I were to describe the spirit of the DNC on the whole, it was a big missed opportunity. And now they're you see them in the news cycle this week trying to pick up the pieces. What do we see to the Democrat politicians that are running for president right now trying to do? They are now trying to go back on some of the things they said before, or say things for the first time, like condemning the violence in our American cities. They're just doing that now, this week. They had an entire convention where they could have really had an opportunity to highlight what they were going to do to quell the violence in all of our American cities. Completely missed opportunity. That's just one example. At any rate, this isn't about the DNC. This video is about the RNC. So I'm just going to highlight a few of the speakers that I felt, and some of their points that I felt were the highlights of the RNC. There were a lot of great moments, probably a lot of moments that I'm going to miss when I do my little breakdown here, but these were my personal favorites. First one, Madison Cawthorn. It's really cool to see. First of all, his entire speech was really well delivered, and it was inspiring, I don't know how anyone could watch that and not feel moved viscerally. It's cool to see young people in that generation, more millennials, getting involved in politics that really have their act together, like this guy, Madison. It was a really powerful moment, obviously, when he stood up at the end of his speech because he's in a wheelchair. So when he's saying, "Stand up with me as I stand up for our country," and to see the difficulty that it is for him to even just stand up simply. It's a moving moment. And you have to be a really calloused, hard person to not be moved by that. At any rate, next highlight from the RNC, Maximal Alvarez. He shared the story about his entire family experiencing what real communism, what real true totalitarian rule is like when you have to live under that. And what it's like to escape that. He made this highlight. He said, there's nowhere else to go. America is it. This is the place to get to. He and his family, they made it from Cuba to America. And basically, he's just telling us how special America is. And it was really a powerful moment hearing it from him. Next moment that I really liked, Herschel Walker. I didn't particularly know I was going to be so moved by a guy that used to be a professional football player coming on and talking at the RNC, but it was really cool to hear his very measured and very cool, calm, collected story of the friendship that he shares personally with Donald Trump. It was really at the end of the whole thing, I think the spirit of Herschel Walker's talk was that what he was getting at was really refuting the concept that Donald Trump is racist. This is a silly narrative that's been getting spun ever since Donald Trump came down the escalator. It really is a disingenuous, silly thing to keep peddling, but somehow the media has repeated it enough, and Democrats have bought in wholeheartedly. They still, every single day, in every news outlet, and anybody I know personally that's a Democrat, they're all on board with the concept that Donald Trump is a racist, and basically Herschel Walker is just very cool, very chill, just like, yeah, he's not a racist. And of course there is no actual evidence that Donald Trump is racist. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that would refute the claim that he is a racist. Next favorite moment that I had, Senator Tim Scott. Really great moment in the RNC. This guy's a star. Overall, speech really great. Best moment was when he put things in perspective about his grandfather, so his grandfather worked on a sharecropping farm when he was young and dealt with actual real racism, not like this weird drummed up silly narratives like trying to be turned into racist acts like a noose hanging in a garage at NASCAR. Like, you really got to reach, No, this guy dealt with real stuff. And the point that Tim Scott made that was really amazing is this concept that his grandfather, who grew up under those conditions, lived to see him become a senator. So I think the concept was something like from segregation to senator in one lifetime. For all of the narrative about how America is systemically racist, which is getting really tired, by the way, it's really amazing to hear from this guy's real life story that, oh yeah, by the way, there has been a block ton of progress in America in the last 50, 60, 70 years. I am living proof of that. And here's a contrast. Here's the experience my grandfather had. Here's the experience I had. At any rate, I'm sure that'll get shuffled under the rug by our mainstream media. They don't want to pay attention to those kinds of stories. They only want to pay attention to the stories that denigrate America, and they just want everybody to feel guilty, feel negative about the identity of America. Like I said, I think it's getting old. I think that people, the general normie populace of America, is beginning to catch on. And of course, that makes the media nervous because they lose control of telling people how to think. At any rate, next favorite moment in the RNC, Nicholas Sandman. Really great talk, very powerful speech, because he was one of the people that was such an obvious target of cancel culture. We all saw it very obviously in real time. And when the full footage came out, which was ignored by our mainstream media, you could see just how insidious cancel culture had become at that point in time. The kid's wearing a red hat, Make America Great. A dude targets him, drums in his face. There's all sorts of other kind of odd noise coming from these weird extremist groups around them, like the Hebrew Israelites. And Nick Sandman, all he could do was kind of freeze up and have a weird smirk on his face. I don't blame the kid at all. The people love to attribute all sorts of extra, even recently in social media. I saw some of the people that are in my network that are liberals putting on a Facebook comment thread about how smug and how arrogant and how entitled this kid looked. The kid's nervous. This guy's beating a drum in his face. At any rate, Nicholas Sandman does a great job of representing himself. Of course, the irony is not lost that CNN had to, was forced to play his speech on their channel, but now he is, in essence, winning a giant lawsuit against CNN, especially since CNN was so complicit in this sort of cancel culture rage attempted against this otherwise innocent kid from, an American high school. And then, of course, it is really funny to see, how much like he was dragged through the mud, and yet this young man seemed very well put together. For all of the attempts to destroy his life, he seemed very well poised and had a pretty strong vibe going. He was doing great in his talk. Okay, moving on to the next moment in the RNC that I really liked. Sister Dede Byrne. Okay, so it was a nun, or at least that's the optics that you get as she's walking out on the stage. I was thinking when I saw her, I was going, well, this one's not going to be the most amazing speech of the RNC. Until you actually hear a little bit more of her story. This lady's actually really amazing. She's not just a nun. Of course, that's the optics you get when you first see her because she's wearing the uniform of a nun. But this woman, her entire career, going back to the beginning, she wanted to become a doctor to serve and help people. She joins the military, she becomes a doctor, she serves for 20, almost 30 years, and now she's a nun. So she's able to speak to issues like valuing the sanctity of life. And she's able to talk about it from like 3 different perspectives of public service. This is an amazing person. We need to take this person seriously. I hope people didn't tune her out just because she was wearing the uniform of a nun. At any rate, one of my personal favorite moments was, and I don't hear this one get talked about a lot from other pundits, but Eric Trump. Of course, he did a really good job of speaking. He's a good public speaker in general. But I think the content, I think his talk was only something like 8 minutes long. But he did a really good job of drawing a contrast between what Donald Trump is going to do going forward and what Biden is offering. Also, he did a great job of very quickly giving us a recap of how did Donald Trump get elected in 2016? What was the chemistry that made that happen? And where are we going now? And then it was really nice to kind of hear him have a moment there where he was giving a message directly to his father. And I think it connected for me. So I thought the whole speech was really great, even though it was only 8 minutes long. Of course, there was many other great moments. I'm going to miss a whole bunch here. But there is one moment I'd like to highlight here. I think this moment stole the show. Maybe it wasn't my favorite moment, but it really, I think, highlighted the time and place we are in right now. I think that it got to the heart of a major issue that is going to be a big voting issue going into November. And it was delivered by somebody that's not even a politician. It was actually David Dorn's widow, Ann Dorn. Once again, fairly short speech that she gave, but it was very touching. Maybe, content-wise, the most impactful talk of the RNC. I'll just encourage you to go check out, if you don't check out any of these other talks from the RNC, definitely look up Ann Dorn's. I'm just going to give a couple of highlights from her speech. I don't know if these are direct quotes or if I'm just kind of getting the gist of it here. She basically, Ann's hope in her talk was that by sharing her nightmare with us, she is hoping that this will end the nightmare that we are all experiencing in our nation together right now. I felt like that was a very powerful statement to make. If we are going to bring about positive change, we need to admit that both sides need to admit that what we are experiencing in the largest cities in America right now is a nightmare. Ann Dorn is willing to admit it. News media is not right now. Maybe they'll catch up. We'll see. I guess if it hurts them enough in the polls, if it hurts Biden enough in the polls, then maybe they will eventually come out and admit that what has been created here, the chemistry, the little chemistry set of America, this little, the outgrowth, the fungus that has grown in all of our major cities of rioting and looting and destruction and fires and arson, all this stuff, all of that is the nightmare. Ann Dorn is calling it out. And this is coming from a woman who lost her husband, David Dorn, during the riots that were a result of people protesting, then rioting, then looting, and then feeling emboldened and doing that more and more and more because the media is praising it and holding it up as some sort of moral good. You know, and this is all as a result of George Floyd, right? So George Floyd, domino effect, is David Dorn dies, and now there's been 32 total deaths as a result of the original guy, George Floyd, right? So, you know, she makes a great point. She says, how did we get to this point where so many young people are calloused and indifferent toward human life? This is not a video game where you can just reset and everyone comes back to life. This is so true. It seems like we have a generation of young people that have been calloused and become indifferent towards other human life. They're ideologically possessed, brainwashed generation of young people running through our streets right now, causing destruction, and in some cases, murdering people on a live stream on Facebook. Innocent people like David Dorn. By the way, David Dorn lived a life of service. She goes on to say, violence and destruction are not legitimate forms of protest. They do not safeguard black lives. They only destroy them. It's a huge statement, regardless of who it comes from, but especially coming from the widow of David Dorn. And of course, the big moment leading up to the end of the RNC is when President Trump gave his speech. It was a very long speech, but I am just going to read a few of the moments that I liked best from his speech. Just tons and tons of great moments, but there was a few mic drops, and this was one of them. Joe Biden says that he is an agent of the light, but when it comes to his policies, he's going to keep you in the dark. That's heavy. I mean, the audience there, when he said that, they were like, ooh. I mean, it was like heavy, just a heavy thing because, you know, you look at the entire DNC, they barely talked about policy at all. I think the only policy that Biden got really serious about was everybody's got to wear a mask in public. It's like, what a weak policy to really stand on. This is going to be my one big policy I'm going to talk about for 6, 8, 9 hours. I don't even know how long that thing was. It was just a lot of footage of like talking and talking and talking with no policy. Yeah, so, you know, for all this agent of the light talk, he's going to keep you in the dark when it comes to his policies. You're not even going to know what he's doing. He just wants you to vote him in because he's not the other guy. That guy's so bad. Vote for me. I'm not going to tell you anything I'm going to do, but that guy's real bad, huh? Joe Biden's motto would be made in China. Our motto would be made in America. And I think this really just goes so deep. This one small, simple joke statement really digs in on that concept of globalism versus nationalism. It digs in on this concept of this guy represents 50 years, some odd 40, 50 years of the swamp. This guy over here represents populists caring about our country, prioritizing our country over globalism. And then, of course, towards the end of Donald Trump's speech, he said, we are focused more on building the future than complaining about the past. Heavy thing to say. In contrast, you know, if we were to look at the DNC versus the RNC, the DNC was cynical, negative, and dour. General, you know, political, I don't know they spoke in generalities, platitudes. I guess just mostly feel-good platitudes is the way that I would describe it. And not even necessarily feel good, feel negative platitudes. Even when they brought out their pop star, Billie Eilish, even that was negative. You know, like the one moment where you've got the like upbeat or supposed to be like the pop star that makes everybody feel viscerally good when they listen to her music. I mean, it's viscerally moving people. Even she comes out there and it's very dour. It's very down. What a bummer. Just basically convincing a whole group of people, about half of the country, to be negative and vote out of your negativity. What a bummer. Not to mention that the DNC was a total alternative reality, not based in any kind of truthful reality at all. They are totally invested in the lies that they are propagating. And then in contrast, the RNC, positive, focused on American greatness instead of focused on what went wrong in the past and bloating that out of proportion and twisting that into all sorts of other sort of storylines. Personal stories of real people, you know, making it about real people instead of just what you might see from the past political events like this, where you just get politician after celebrity just spouting platitudes, which that's actually what the DNC was. And then, of course, the RNC, it was totally based. Moving on, the media narrative to protect the rioters is in part what is driving this violence. The media is really complicit in all this. There's been two stories that have been trending this week, as you know. They both come out of Kenosha, Wisconsin. I think Donald Trump's going there today or tomorrow. I guess Biden was supposed to go into Kenosha, but that's getting canceled now. I don't know if he's like feeling under the weather or maybe he's just too tired. I don't know. But both these stories that are coming out of Kenosha, Wisconsin, the big stories was Jacob Blake first, and then the rioting began, and you know, sort of the, I guess, the knee-jerk reaction to riot, and then this follow-up story, Kyle Rittenhouse, where you know, obviously you know the story. I don't have to tell you again. So we have two major media stories coming out, and there's been a lot of chatter in Twitter, Facebook, all the social media platforms. But both stories are being used by the media to push their specific narrative that they're invested in. Once again, there's this large problem with racism and egregious overreach of our police in America without any investigation first into either of these stories, without taking a step back and saying, hold on a second, let's be real reporters about all this. No, it's just make a story based on a narrative, fill in the blanks with the current names, and then push the idea out there. It reminds me a lot of when I was a kid, and I'd be taken to the grocery store by my parents, and we would be going through the checkout line. You'd see the magazines on the magazine rack, and one of them would be the National Enquirer, you know? Leave in the comment section if you remember the National Enquirer. I don't know, is that still a thing? Maybe the National Enquirer still exists. There's still these rags, basically. The National Enquirer was particularly bad at this. Whatever celebrities were hot in that time, they would make up some kind of crazy, outrageous story, put the big headline right on the cover of the magazine, and then the headline would be some complete fabrication about these people's lives. And there would be a whole story written about it. And then come to find out a few weeks later, none of that was true. The people aren't getting a divorce. They didn't have a child with two heads. Whatever the crazy story, they weren't abducted by aliens after all. Whatever crazy story the National Enquirer was pushing, that was the priority. There was no truth in any of this. And I feel like our 90% or so of our national media in America today has just devolved into National Enquirer level news. It's all narrative. it's all them making up stories and then filling in the blanks later. We got a couple of names. We've got some footage on the internet. We'll tell you what we have conjured up as the story about what's going on there. No real reporting going on at all. I think this in part is what is leading to this sort of general derangement of our younger generations now. The media has been pushing systematically for 20, 30 years, very specific narratives to keep our young people confused and always whipped up into an angry emotional frenzy. And I really do think this is in part what is promoting the derangement of our younger generations. Young adults trained like Pavlovian dogs to spring into action every time someone screeches police brutality and or racism. It's making them see boogeyman everywhere they look. This is what we've created. This is what our media wants to see happen in the greatest country in the world. Destroying a young generation with constant panic and negativity. Here's a thought. If we didn't vilify the police unnecessarily to begin with, I wonder if Jacob Blake would have felt emboldened to resist the police the way that he did, as forcefully as he did. Because they had their guns drawn on him even before he ran around the car to open the door. What was he doing? Was he going to get in the car to drive away? Was he going to grab the weapon that was underneath the seat? We don't know what he was doing. The police actually probably had a better idea there in the moment to know how to deal with that situation. You know, I saw someone in my social media, he had said something to support this concept that Jacob Blake, should not have been treated this way. And he would hope that even if he was a criminal, that people would support him. It was just some kind of silly, gobbledygook, brain dead post on Facebook. But what I was thinking about is, look, the standard is the same for all of us. When you meet a police officer, if you're out in public, in that moment, when you meet a police officer that's in uniform and they're on duty, that person represents the law in that moment. So if they ask you to do something, your best approach is to just simply comply with the law enforcement. Law enforcement's in there, it's in the title. We have given them the authority to represent the law in that moment. Best possible option for you is to listen to what the police officer tells you to do and comply. Pretty sure you, on most cases, regardless of your race, you're going to be able to avoid lethal action. Just a thought. And then to go even a step further, if the police in our country were backed up and empowered in our communities right now to uphold that law and order that they were hired to, that they were trained to do, I wonder if the Kyle Rittenhouse would have even felt the need to boldly go out in the street with a rifle to begin with. That kid, 17 years old, with a rifle on the street, shouldn't have even been there. If we could rewind the clock and we could not embolden all of these looting and rioting all of our American cities based on each time someone gets killed on camera and it gets put on Facebook. If we could somehow get some perspective and realize that the police are actually on our side, they're actually the good guys. Yes, of course, there's a few bad actors out there with the police. But on the whole, police officers, somewhere in the 90 percentile, are really great citizens that love their communities, that want to serve their communities where they live, and those are the people that we should be celebrating. We should not be looking at, of course, there's going to always be a few outliers. There's going to be a few bad actors within any industry. Honestly, police department is one we're picking on right now, but there are bad actors in every profession across the board, looking for ways to either take advantage or use or hurt or commit some sort of offense. I know it's fashionable right now and even cool to talk about or to share stories about the moral corruption of our police agencies in America. But the truth is, most police officers, in a great majority, are really great citizens that love their communities, that are trying to help, as I said before. Rioting and looting and causing violence in our communities as a knee-jerk reaction to perceived police overreach, that needs to end. All that needs to, it's just not solving the problem. You know, as Ann Dorn said, violence and destruction are not legitimate forms of protest. It's time to get some perspective. At any rate, that's the news today. Americana X Newswatch. Thanks for being here if you stuck around to the end. Remember, like, comment, subscribe. Also, share this video. That's the way that we keep this positive content from getting out there. This is the kind of news show that's going to give commentary that is going to refute the negativity that's coming from the mainstream media. We need more shows like this one. And the way that we do that, the way that we support me making this show, is sharing it out there with people that you know. Thanks in advance. It's been another episode of Americana X Newswatch. We'll see you in a few days.